Hey, Jeff, we're going to get to Tanner Pearson and the Canucks in a second, but I saw you tweet this out. 3 years ago Monday, the Sedins played their final home game at Rogers Arena. What do you remember about that night?
For me, Donnie, it was overtime. It was, and I remember talking to Bo Horvat about it. I think on the second anniversary, where he said, I won the face-off, and I did nothing else. I just stood there as the puck moved from Daniel to Henrik to Edler, back to Daniel to Henrik, and obviously Daniel with the shot that won it all. And we haven't heard Rogers Arena that loud since the 2011 run. Like, it was such a moment. It couldn't have been scripted any better. And it's sort of seared into my memory bank, along with many others of my time covering the Vancouver Canucks. But what a moment to be there. And I was fortunate enough when I was traveling with the team, I got to go to Edmonton for their final game in the National Hockey League as well, that ended in a shootout where they had the family down on the bench. And, another spectacular moment when they lined up and sort of did the receiving line with the Oilers after all was said and done. But, in some ways, I kind of wish that had been their mic drop moment, and they had just walked away after the final home game, because there was just no way in the world to top it, and what a way that would have been to go out for the Sedins.
We think back to that time, and we just think to ourselves, oh, well, they were past it. The Sedins weren't what they used to be, and they weren't. They weren't putting up 100-point seasons and winning Art Rosses like they had in the past. But Daniel had 55 points that year. Henrik 50. Could they have kept playing, Jeff?
Yeah, I think they probably could have. You look at Patrick Marleau still going. Joe Thornton is still playing. I mean, those are sort of their peers. Obviously, Marleau has slowed down and is now chasing the all-time games played record. And Joe Thornton, to his credit, picked a spot where I think he thought he had a legitimate shot of winning a Stanley Cup. And we'll see how things play out ultimately for the Leafs come playoff time. But yeah, I think that there could have been certainly another year for Daniel and Henrik, but they had such high standards for themselves. You're right, 50-point seasons, nothing to sneeze at all. And yet for these guys who had been 100-point guys, I think they kind of felt that they weren't as effective as obviously they had been in their prime, and that they were starting to slow down. I don't think it was nearly as much fun. I mean, they loved being hockey players and coming to the rink, but we also know that, the Willie D era, it wasn't going well for the Vancouver Canucks, and I don't think that they wanted that sort of to be their legacy, was that they were playing out the string and just trying to push their careers as far as they could go. So I think, to the surprise of no one, that they did the honorable thing, as they did throughout their career, and that was just to step away when they felt that the time was right. I love the fact that they gave us all a week's notice so that there was build up to that final home game. And I've heard, lots of people. I've heard from lots of people who, had tickets to the final home game of the Canucks season that year against Arizona and thought the Canuck game against the Coyotes, big deal. And then the way it turned out, provides a lifetime for a memory for a lifetime. And when, you asked me about my memories of that night, Don, in overtime, like if you go back and you watch the highlights, the crowd is crackling on that power play. Like the anticipation of what's to come, I think people could sense that the Sedins so rarely disappointed and came through in those big moments, and that was yet another one. And I just love, if you just listen to, forget the play-by-play and the sounds of the game, it's the crackle of the crowd and the build-up to Daniel's goal.
All right, again, our guest of the day on this Wednesday is brought to you by, there we go, the O's marketing team at Royal LePage on the island. It's our first week, folks. We're having some technical difficulties. Okay, so we apologize for that. Let's continue with Jeff Paterson now. Jeff, I don't know if everybody got your answer on Tanner Pearson's future in Vancouver. So if you could recap, we'd sure appreciate it.
Did I break the machine here?
Yes,
I feel bad.
Yeah,
you're that powerful.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but look, Donnie, I think the Canucks should be looking at peddling Tanner Pearson. I just think that where they are at this point in time, he's got no trade protection, and I do think that he's an asset. I think teams would look at him as a guy with Stanley Cup pedigree from his time in Los Angeles, a guy that has been productive in the National Hockey League. My concern, though, is this season full of red flags. This is a 21-goal scorer from last year. He's sitting on 33 games into this season. I know he was hurt when the play was halted because of COVID, but 6 goals in 33 games, but essentially a 15-goal pace, which isn't terrible. But he's done it as a second-line guy with some power play time. If you're going to lock him up to a multi-year deal, what is he moving forward here? He's going to be 29 in the summer, and if he is in decline, they've spent the last couple of years trying to get out from under these onerous contracts that have clogged the system and held some other guys back. And I just worry a little bit if Tanner Pearson, the speed of the game, foot speed's not necessarily his thing. How effective can he be? And I know that the coaching staff likes this guy. He's low maintenance. He's a true pro through and through. There's absolute value in all of that. But I just wonder, if Jim Benning's given the 2-year window to be competitive, what is a 31-year-old Tanner Pearson? Where does he fit into your lineup and all of that? And I wonder if you couldn't peddle him and get a draft pick, maybe a third-round pick that you could then turn and find a team that's going to be in an expansion protection pinch. Look, they got Nate Schmidt from Vegas for a third-round pick. There are going to be teams that don't want to lose players for nothing that might be willing to deal a little closer to the expansion draft. So, it's a lot of moving parts. I get that, but I just wonder if the value to the Canucks for Tanner Pearson isn't in trading him for an asset that then you can peddle down the road rather than locking him up and keeping him here. And I know you guys have kicked this around too, if you move on from Tanner Pearson, then what? Which just underscores sort of the lack of depth that the Canucks have at the wing position in the National Hockey League. So they are sort of damned if they do and damned if they don't.
Jeff, I'm trying to look at this blue line for next year. Edler, Hamonic, and Ben are all UFAs. I really think they like Hamonic, and I wonder if they'll get something done with Hamonic down the road. Triampkin's an RFA. They're going to talk to his agent this month. When I think of Alexander Edler, it's a hot-button topic all the time. What do you think of Edler, and would you bring him back next year on a 1-year deal?
I think I'd be willing to do a 1-year deal, but as much as he has meant to this organization, I think that they'd have to play a little bit of hardball with him. And I'm not saying lowball him for an NHL minimum, but I do think that you'd have to be looking at sort of the same kind of contract that Travis Hamonic had this year, just over $1 million. The Canucks have lined Alex Edler's pockets with millions of dollars over the years, and in return, he has provided great value and terrific service, but they're at a point in time where they can't be handing out contracts, sort of legacy deals, just because the guy has always been here. I think when you look at Alex Edler this year, Rick, you have to take the penalties into account. The league is just getting faster all the time. He's going to be 35 here soon, and penalties are a part of who Alex Edler is. If you can live with that, then so be it. But I think it's not going to get a whole lot better on the penalty front. He is a step slow now. We see when guys make him turn, he has trouble pivoting and getting back into the play. And so if you could find a way to get him a little lower in the depth chart, if you could tell me that he would be the third pairing guy on the left side, they'd use him for some penalty killing, and I would play at even strength as well. I think that's the ideal role, but the concern there is that Alex Edler is going to come back, and we've already seen it on a lot of nights this year that they use him in a matchup role. He's playing 23, 24 minutes a night, and that's without power play time. And I think that's when he runs into trouble and when the hockey club runs into trouble. So, you want him out there as a penalty killer, but the problem is he spends a lot of time in the penalty box. Tyler Meyer is among the league leaders in minor penalties taken as well. That's a dangerous combination. You can't be serving up power plays to your opponents all the time. And if two of your defenders are beating a path to the penalty box all the time, then, I think it's something that the hockey club has to look at. But I don't see this as the end for Alex Edler, so I do think that there's probably a way to get him back on a team-friendly 1-year deal.
Well, and at some point, Jeff, do they not have to get Oli Levy in? I mean, he finally gets with the big team. He's here, and now he's had a long stretch. He hasn't played. At some point, how does the organization – I mean, the trust level obviously isn't there with the coach and the player, but how do you get this guy incorporated in the lineup?
Right, and that's sort of, I think Edler is part of the equation there, and also Jack Rathbone, because I think a lot of people think that ultimately Jack Rathbone, if he hasn't already, is going to pass Oli Levy on the depth chart, and the excitement level around Rathbone as a prospect, Levy's played now in the NHL, and so I think that there was sort of this push from the organization to make that happen so that people could stop saying, is he ever going to play? he has played. But I still think he's played in sheltered minutes. He's looked okay, but you can't shelter a guy throughout his career. You want to believe that he's going to continue to develop. But we talked about foot speed with Edler. I think there are some concerns about Oli Levy and his skating ability and his foot speed as well, where Rathbone certainly fits the profile of like a modern NHLer who gets around the ice, and skating is really one of his strong suits. So we know that Quinn Hughes is going to be a linchpin on the left side, and then your guess is as good as mine about how that left side shakes down. And Nate Schmidt, a left shot guy who's played the right side, but when he was paired with Myers at times, he can play the left as well. So, there's, I think, questions about the left side. There are a few options, but, are they optimal? And where does Oli Levy fit into all of that? I don't have the answer, and I'm not sure the Canucks do, quite frankly. And, look, Travis Green's been trying to win hockey games when they've had games to play. And the fact that he's gone with 4 guys in their 30s, and Nate Schmidt, who's going to be 30 here in the summer, Quinn Hughes, the only young defenseman, that tells you something about what the coaching staff thinks is their best lineup that gives them a chance to win hockey games here. So unfortunately for Oli Levy, unfortunately for Jalen Chatfield, they've become odd men out taxi squad guys, but some of that I think is due to their own performance when they have been in the best league in the world. We know that it was a bit of a struggle for Chatfield, and Levy still, I think, has a fair bit to prove before we can say that he's an everyday staple on that Vancouver Canuck defense.
Ian McIntyre from Sportsnet reporting yesterday, Oilers have been told not to expect games against the Canucks next week. That was on the 12th, or those would have been on the 12th and the 14th. Also, Jeff, just before we let you go, we got an update from the Canucks, a press release. 25 individuals have tested positive, and the source infection is confirmed a variant. They're trying to find the specific type of a variant, but it is a variant. So not the best of news for the Vancouver Canucks, obviously. But do you have any confidence the Canucks can complete a 56-game schedule, Jeff?
56 seems challenging to me at this point, Don. Today is 1 week since they gathered for that morning skate, so it's been a full week now around this time that they were even on the ice as a group. It's been 2 weeks since they've played a game, and we're hearing reports that there will be another player added to the list when it comes out later today. So, I was hoping that today was going to be the first day where no new names appeared, and maybe we could start to think that this was the beginning of the recovery and start to look ahead. I still wonder, and you know how this works, right? Like, it's not truly a crisis until the team from Toronto is involved.
Yes.
Yes.
So
could you imagine?
The Canucks are on this right now. They'd be in the midst of a 7-game road trip. They had the game against Calgary last week postponed. They're not going to play any of these 7 games on the road trip. So that's 8. I'm looking at that Saturday afternoon, 4:00 start, early game, hockey night in Canada against you-know-who, and I feel like that's a game that the league would want to go forward. They don't want to inconvenience the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Great point.
And so that, to me, feels like maybe there's enough time for guys to have some negative tests, to get back on the ice, get a practice or 2 in, cobble together some sort of lineup, because it's hockey night in Canada, and they don't want their lineup disrupted. Look, they're not going to force the Canucks to play if they're not healthy. But that's the game I look at. Yeah. It's the first of 2 against the Maple Leafs. It's a home game, so you're not forcing the Canucks to travel anywhere, just to try to get as healthy as possible. And I just, if in fact that game gets postponed, I can't wait to see the reaction out of Toronto, because the stories will be,
that'll
first
be
of all,
a crisis.
Well, yeah, it won't just be, another game's postponed for the Canucks. It'll be like COVID hits the Leafs, and, what will this do to Austin Matthews' Rocket Richard bid, and will it take Mitch Marner out of his rhythm? Like, those are the stories that will be written about the Toronto Maple Leafs if they're inconvenienced. When you think about what the Canucks have been through, to hell and back here in the last week or so, and they're not out of the woods just yet. But when I look at the schedule and the way I could see, return to play, I've kind of got that Saturday, April 17th game against the Leafs circled.
Well said. Jeff, good to have you aboard. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you on Friday.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.